said, our speaker is Marci Trana, who has a wide range of experience studying all sorts of various animals. And I will turn it over to Karen to provide a more thorough introduction.
Well, I don't know about how thorough, but I have worked with the 3 young women at Kent Park during the birding course that I've taught and so on. So I can't remember exactly. I ran into Marci and I think I told her I was looking for a speaker. Anyway, I consider them all naturalists. They're all listed as education specialists and their bios are just fascinating. Marci has worked with all kinds of mammals. She's worked with spotted owls and it's just amazing the background that she brings to Johnson County. And you should all probably check out the newsletter. You can sign up for it, or you could just go to their website and look at their newsletter. There's always lots of interesting things going on. And we have really a wide array of Johnson County conservation areas in the county. But at any rate, when I talked to Marci, she said she could do this program, and I thought it would be very interesting. We're all interested in what's going on with wind turbines and solar and all these new energy, natural energy ways that are coming forward. So Marci, are you ready?
I am.
Lost her. I can't find her on my screen.
Oh,
anyway,
I'm here.
You're here? Okay, yep. Awesome. I give you Marci.
Yay. Thank you, Karen. So I think I'm guessing that I need to share screen. Do I have permission to do that?
Yeah.
Already? Okay, perfect. Let's see here.
If you have any questions, direct them to Sandy.
Okay, sounds good. All right, I'm gonna move this over. Okay, so you guys should see a screen with kind of the announcement that I sent out, the wind turbines and solar. Everybody seeing that?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm gonna change my view here so I can see you all on my screen. And there we go. Okay, so oh yeah, did someone say something? No, okay. All right, so yeah, I wanted to talk with you guys. Karen's right, so she had asked me about talking, and my previous, right before I came to Johnson County Conservation, my previous employment was working for a private consulting firm, an environmental consulting firm, and we primarily at that consulting firm worked on wind energy projects. And they also work with solar. I personally didn't work with any solar projects, but I did manage teams of wildlife biologists who would walk around the turbines looking for any bird or bat fatalities. So that was what I spent the last 6 years doing, was managing projects and teams of people throughout the Midwest here in the US. So just a little bit more about me. Some of you probably know these things about me, but I grew up in Iowa, just east of here in the Wilton-Durant area, Cedar County. And pretty much, so my parents took me out to the Bighorn Mountains when I was 8 years old, and I just fell in love with the mountains. I was just fascinated with the vastness and the wildness of the mountains in the West. And so when on kind of the cusp of my 21st birthday, I moved out to Wyoming, spent some time there doing all sorts of things, apprenticed as a baker for 3 years, worked in auto detailing, worked in the food service industry before heading back to school to finish my bachelor's in zoology and physiology at University of Wyoming. And while I was there, I was very fortunate to be offered or to be allowed to join various PhD students and professors and master's students while they did their research in different areas. And that led me to help with a project on polar bears in northern Alaska, in a little tiny, it's not even really a town, it's actually an old military station up there, and it's called Oliktok. And it's a very northernmost point on that kind of northern part of Alaska. And then I also worked in Glacier National Park looking at fire ecology with plants and trees, and doing research on that and collecting data. And then went to Grand Teton National Park to do research on bighorn sheep. And that was the year after I completed my bachelor's degree and before I started my master's. So then I started my master's up in Canada. I chose Canada because the university up there, University of Manitoba, has a really strong connection to Arctic ecology. And I was really fascinated with the Arctic. Obviously, I'd been hearing numerous things about the Arctic and climate change throughout my bachelor's degree, and just thought that that felt like the place where everything was happening. That was where everything was most exaggerated, and everyone was really looking at things up there, and they still are. But it just really fascinated me. So I went up there and got my master's looking at stress in beluga whales of the Canadian Arctic. There are 4 distinct populations that we had samples collected from the native Canadians there hunt beluga, and so they collect samples in partnership with the government, and then those samples are then available to do scientific studies. So that's what I did for my master's, and that was heavy in the lab. So I was pretty much in the lab constantly processing blubber from whales. It was a very stinky and gooey but really interesting and fun work. But again, I was fortunate enough to have some people take pity on me and take me out to the field to help them on their research. So the photo up here is me helping with some ring seal research on a boat, and we'd go out in the boat all day and net ring seals and then take some measurements and put radio collar trackers on them. And then I also went out and helped with some Arctic fox research that was going on as well, which was really fun and enjoyable, and they're pretty charismatic, so that was just really fun. Each of these times I would go away, I was always, like Karen alluded to, I was always fascinated with the mammals. They were always what I was really into. And I kept getting pulled into birds periodically. And so this is a photo of me helping Dave Conrad's banding hawks, various hawk species. And I had come back to Iowa to visit my family for Thanksgiving, and my dad knew Dave and had Dave asked if my husband and I wanted to come out and do this work with him. So of course we said yes, and so was able to do that. And then while I was in Canada, I started helping out at various banding stations, kind of learning about banding, and that was kind of my first real deep dive into birding and bird ID. And so that's kind of where I got my start a little bit later in my career, I guess, but still it was really, really fun. So then went out to Oregon and did spotted owl research just as I got done with my master's. That's where I got my first position. So that's me in the lush green Oregon forest, which was just absolutely stunning. I did not get to see any spotted owls, but I got to see a lot of barred owls. And the barred owls were so fun. Just would the surveys were in the middle of the night. I was by myself in very dark, dense woods, and the woods are located, it's the Tillamook Forest, which is located west of Portland, and so it can be kind of an area for people to go to if they are in trouble. And so it was pretty scary and intimidating work, and a little creepy, but really enjoyable. And the barred owls made it all worth it because they would come into my hoot box that was hooting spotted owl calls, and they would come in because they were curious and would not make a single sound, of course. I had no idea they were there. And then when I just would get ready to turn off the hoot box, they would do their really awesome like hoo-ah at me, which was just, and it would scare me so bad every time, but I also just loved it so much. So um, anyway, so after taking that kind of seasonal position in Oregon, I got pulled back to Iowa again through this consulting firm that I worked for the last 6 years, previous 6 years. And again, we were working on wind turbines, looking at bird and bat mortality. And that's a picture of me at a turbine here in Iowa. And then got pulled into bird banding again with Mark, reached out and met Mark, like Mark mentioned, and was able to hop on some banding and get back into a little bit more birding and bird ID at that point. And that kind of connected me with Kent Park a little bit more, and familiarized myself with the naturalists and staff here. And then ended up getting what I like to call my dream job here at Johnson County Conservation as a naturalist. So kind of coming full circle back to my roots, because I worked for County Conservation in Muscatine my childhood and teenage years. So that was really fun. So here's a picture of my family. This is my husband, Ryan, and our daughter, Marlene, who is 4, and our daughter, Esther, who is 18 months. So I want to just preface this next part of the conversation and presentation just with the fact that I am not an expert on climate change. I am not an expert on renewable energies. I have dipped my toes in renewable energy, I would say, but am by no means an expert, and am always learning more, but I'm very passionate about it as a method of reducing climate change. So I'm just going to share with you guys what I've learned over the years and in my own personal endeavors to find out more about it. So what I want to cover in this first part is just, what renewable energy is. Basically just an energy from a source that is naturally replenished. And that source can be a slow replenish, like, forests using wood and wood and burning wood for energy, which would be kind of a slow turnover, but still, technically renewable. And then it can also be more immediate results or faster results like wind and solar. So we have five most common renewable energy sources that are available to date. Biomass, which is, like I talked about, just using forests and burning wood for fuel, or biofuel, the use of biofuel. And we have hydroelectric. Obviously, we know that some dams are fitted with the ability to harness energy and store that and use that energy. Geothermal, drilling into the Earth's surface and then using that heat and differential to power electricity. And then we have wind energy harnessed from wind, and then energy harnessed from solar. And what I wanted to mention here is that currently in the US, 11% of our energy demands are captured by renewable energies combined. So only 11% of what we're needing or using is supplied by that currently. And from these, we know that the effects on birds specifically, range from habitat loss or degrading of habitat, loss of water, which also can obviously impact species that then impact birds or impact birds directly. And then we have direct impacts of avian wildlife like birds and bats with wind energy. And then again with solar, habitat loss and surface water use.
Yeah, Marci's talking about birds.
So I just wanted to also, as a fun thing, I mentioned this to folks early on, but just talking about renewable energy and climate change and impacts on wildlife can be a very heavy topic. And so I'm going to lighten it up just a little bit, you guys, by doing a little bit of a bird ID game. I think all of you are going to be able to ID these very, very quickly, but just bear with me and have fun with it. We're going to have our birds here to cheer us up. So if anybody wants to, put it in the chat, I think is what, Sandy, is that right? To put it in the chat?
Yes, if you
Okay.
want to put in a chat to everyone to answer Marci's questions or to identify the birds, that would be great.
Yeah, so and this isn't, nobody's gonna win a prize, so you don't need to worry or be nervous, but if anybody just wants to throw in for fun what these two birds in this slide are, you can throw it up there and we'll move on to the next slide and keep going. So I'm gonna keep moving along here. I'll give you guys a minute before I show what it is. This is an easy, I wanted to start out with an easy one. So obviously, as many of you probably suspected, this is an indigo bunting pair, a male and female. So I'm going to jump into wind energy specifically. So, so the impacts to birds from wind energy can be summarized by three different components. So direct impacts, which would be, or collision with either a turbine blade or the tower, the monopole. And most collisions are, thought to be with turbine blades, but on occasion there are collisions that can occur with just the tower or the monopole that's there, and there can also be collision with turbine blades that are not actually spinning, but those are far less common. Indirect impacts are mostly all tied up in alteration of habitat, whether that be fragmentation or degradation of habitat. You can pretty much summarize all the indirect impacts by that. And then the other thing to consider with wind energy and with any type of energy form is just the cumulative impacts. So while this one, entity that is wind energy has impacts both indirect and direct, there's also going to be a component of it adding to several different impacts that are out there outside of wind energy. And those cumulative effects are important to consider. So here's another bird ID, so everybody can just take a minute. I'll move through them pretty fast. Hopefully you guys are probably knowing what all these are. So this is an eastern wood pewee. And so to measure the direct impacts of bird mortality or bird fatality or injury at turbines, most wind energy companies or many wind energy farms conduct regular searches at turbines, often within the first few years of operation, and then often even after that, they'll monitor bird and bat fatalities to track that and to include that data. The data becomes publicly available, but it might take some time for that data to become available. The American Wind Wildlife Institute also archives a bunch of data, and they include data that is both publicly available and data that is not yet publicly available, but it does allow institution-wise or industry-wide, it allows folks to access data on a mass basis and then make management decisions and inform them about how to change, kind of how changes can happen in real time. So that's a really good aspect of wind energy. And then, so most published data to this point that you have access to, that the public has access to, show a fatality rate of 3 to 6 birds per megawatt per year. And just to give everyone an idea, each turbine ranges in its megawatt generating capabilities from lower to high megawatt. The highest that's available, I think, currently is about 3 megawatts per turbine, or they're built that way. And so if you can, kind of in your mind think about that if there's 3 megawatts, if it's 3 megawatt turbine, then you can kind of extrapolate that out to the fatalities that are caused per turbine. So to date, from publicly available data, no population level effects have been found with any given bird species. So there are individual effects, but no population level effects to date with birds. And just to give a little bit of a comparison here, I really like to look at it this way because I think it really helps put things into perspective. It's really easy to see wind turbines operating, to see the velocity at which their blades turn. They're so present on the landscape and so obvious that it's really easy to see them as this kind of, large impact on birds, but to compare them then to other impacts is really important. So just to give you an idea, house cats specifically cause the vast majority of bird deaths and bird mortality. And then you can see building glass or homes and buildings are next there. Our vehicles obviously cause a lot of mortality for birds. And then it, kind of goes on and on, but you can see that land-based wind turbines are fairly low on this list. And they're still there. It's, still 234,000. That's not a number to just shrug off and not be concerned about. And that's why the government and the wind industry are continuing to work on how to minimize those impacts. And this is actually a picture of our cat Leo, who, by the way, does not ever get to go outside. Poor little guy, but he just stays inside and watches the birds so that they are safe and makes strange cackling noises. But yeah, my husband and I have known about these impacts for a long time through just pursuing our career in biology, wildlife biology, and so we have kept him indoors. The other important thing to note here, caveat to note here, is there's a few things that we haven't measured direct impacts for. So habitat loss or conversion of habitat from development probably exceeds all of these. It's really hard to measure all the development that humans are doing. And so, just keep in mind that, that number that cats take, possibly it could be even higher for habitat loss and conversion and the impact that has on birds. So, just again, thinking about, our spread and our development as humans. Offshore wind turbines, there's not a whole lot of data on bird mortalities with offshore wind turbines to date that's publicly available. Same thing with solar panels and burning solar towers, which is just another form of solar energy. So the wind energy industry is pursuing improvements constantly. And like I mentioned before, there's currently a voluntary implementation of third-party fatality studies. So that would be what I did before I came here to Johnson County Conservation, working in the consulting side of things. I was a third party, and I would my company would have worked for the wind energy companies, but also was a go-between between them and the government. And then we'd all work together to come to solutions. And this currently is voluntary. All wind turbines that are all wind energy companies that are doing searches are by and large all doing this on a voluntary basis. It's not necessarily required. It's just requested by the government. And so those obviously doing those searches improves our understanding of what species are being taken, how are they being taken, how is their habitat being affected. It improves how how the industry cites facilities before they even go in. So, if you've studied at one facility and it's taking a lot of a certain species of bird, then you would know based on that criteria that maybe that, site away from those areas. And then it also allows for the implementation of avoidance or minimization measures. And this usually has to do with curtailment. There's some other things that you can do, but curtailment meaning just turning off or slowing down or not having the turbines operate in high use periods, like during, mass migration events, or there's even aggressive curtailment where they'll hire or they'll have their own staff sit in a vehicle below the turbines and then call into the headquarters and have them shut off turbines when they see eagles coming. So that can happen too, as again, information comes from these fatality studies. So there's also investment into a pretty big movement to invest into deterrent technologies. So use of either, auditory equipment, so making sounds that then deter birds, or visual technology. And you guys might have heard of this, Paint It Black. I don't know if how many of you have heard of this, but it's kind of cool that they did this study and at a wind farm and for 6 years, and they basically realized that by painting the one turbine blade black, that they saw about a 70% reduction in bird collisions. So it's a really promising thing, and I think the wind industry is very excited in general about this study. It was just recently released in 2020. So it will be, or I think it's 2019 maybe. So this will be hopefully something that can be tried as well to reduce impacts. And there is also maybe some investment in the future in physically changing turbines, though, there's often a cost, kind of a benefit trade-off with that in efficiency. So there's vertical axis or bladeless turbines that have been proposed and conceptually. So now I'm just going to move on to solar energy and take you guys kind of down that road a little bit. So solar energy's impact on birds, I'm going to list first the negative impacts. And again, I had to really search for these. Most of these are one incident or one case or one facility that had this happen. Most all of them they've been able to implement mitigation or stop it from happening and protect the birds. So wastewater evaporation ponds can be common at some solar facilities, and those ponds can sometimes accumulate toxic chemicals that could then be transferred to invertebrates in the water and then up into birds. And this was just a kind of a study projecting that this could occur, and so there was advice given to the industry to fence off or close off or make it so that birds wouldn't be able to access these areas. And then there are certain structures or certain ways that they engineer solar farms where they heat from central towers, and the heat goes to the central tower and it's very warm, and those can cause burning or incinerations of birds if they were to get closer in that beam or close to that tower. And again, the awareness is there, and the ability to change that technology has already started happening. There's also some suggestion that fencing around solar facilities could reduce migration, especially or habitat access for maybe land-based birds that are, lekking or have lekking behaviors or things like that. So there's been suggestion to allow for the passage of birds under fences or through little fence windows. But overall, like I said, the impacts to avian wildlife at solar farms are very minimal. And I'm seeing a flashing up here. I think it's probably just you guys commenting about the bird species, but I think we're going to do a question period at the end. So I'll wait until the end to answer any questions. So here's another bird ID. Hopefully this is an easy one for everyone. So if you haven't already put your guess up, go ahead. I see some guesses coming through. And I'm sure you guys all had it. This is a song sparrow. Let's see if I can see the chats here without. Nice. Awesome. Okay. So on to our next slide, if it'll let me. Okay. So as it turns out, though, solar energy farms can actually have some pretty amazing positive impacts on birds and wildlife in general. So there's a lot of work right now as the industry is gearing up for more and more solar. There's a lot of discussion and a lot of passionate discussion around adding native plants or pollinator habitat surrounding solar panels. And then, if solar is going into an area that has previously been depleted due to development or agricultural practices, this can actually be, a net gain for the wildlife and the birds in that area. So here's an example of a pollinator-friendly vegetation on a solar farm. You can see all the amazing flowers blooming. And then here's another kind of example of how these, costs to having the solar panels cover the ground can benefit, because they can site them around these features that then allow corridors for wildlife. And then here's a whole row of panels with bird nests under every single little crook and crevice, which is kind of neat, providing them a little bit of protection and relief there from the elements. And then this was a study done in Germany. And so I'm throwing some European birds at you guys for ID. So this will test your European bird skills here. These were two birds that were found to benefit from solar energy infrastructure. So this is the hopo or hopu. I think there's two different ways to describe it. Beautiful bird. And then the tawny pipit. And these were two birds that they had found in a study that benefited. So just to, this was also a figure that came from some of these studies, and this just goes back to, and I really like this figure because it just clearly shows you that when you put solar on degraded lands or lands that have been previously developed or degraded from human development, that you kind of get this net gain in water quality and this carbon sequestration, and then obviously your biodiversity and wildlife, and then your pollinators. And then you can see, but if you were to take a area that's forested or an area that's really prime habitat, then you see that you're going to have some losses. So where you site these, where you put these, really makes a huge difference. So just to reflect again on reflecting on just these renewable energy sources that we've talked about, currently, the impact is on individual birds at this point that we know, not on the population level. Solar development, as I talked about, could potentially be a net gain for birds. We could actually see some benefits for birds and some help for them. And again, just reiterating that there's no population level impacts at this point that's publicly available. But you might all be kind of wondering, how does this change if we look forward to the future? How, as humans, as the human population grows and our pressures get greater and greater, how does this pan out? It's all fine now maybe, but what does it look like in the future? Oh, and sorry. Hopefully you guys got some guesses in there. Carolina Wren. So energy demands of the future and our climate. I think this is really, really a crucial piece here, because if we have to expand out these energy sources, that of course that expansion is going to have some more effect on wildlife. So when it comes to climate change and birds, and this is probably things that you guys all have heard, I'm probably preaching to the choir here a little bit, but the major impacts are thought to be, shifts in their distribution or range from, higher in elevation and further to the poles, as they get away from warmer changing kind of midsection of the planet. And then again, it exposes birds to extreme weather events. And I think we can speculate that we've seen some of this already. Just they get exposed to an extreme weather event that they're not used to. And as those happen more frequently and more frequently, that, adds pressure on them and can create fatality events. So all of this ultimately results in greater competition with unfamiliar competitors. So if, for example, if a bird that is typically in the valley has to move up the mountain or down the mountain, they're going to then not be filling that niche that they were evolved to fill. So then they're competing with another individual who might fill the niche, below or up north, and or down in the south, and then that overlap, they're just not adapted for that evolutionarily, and so then those could cause pressures on their populations and create declines. So it's pretty universally understood that climate change will affect birds at the population level. And that's pretty universally understood by numerous studies that have been done. Hopefully everybody got a guess in there. Another easy one. So what is renewable energy's role in reducing climate change? So in the US, I think has a particular responsibility to come up with a vast amount of clean energy and renewable energy. The US has historically contributed the highest amount of CO2 emissions in the world, twice as much as China. So definitely the US needs to take the lead in addressing this. And renewable energy is currently, like I said at the beginning of this presentation, at about 11% of our energy demands. There's a really cool report called the 2035 report. If you get a chance to take a look at it, it's super, super interesting and really well written. It basically puts up the challenge of meeting a 90% renewable energy kind of goal by 2035, so just in just 15 years. And it feels good to read about it, but just note that there are numerous challenges, but they kind of throw the scenario that it is actually possible with some very aggressive movement. So globally, across the entire planet, we need it to be between 63 and 97% renewable energy to get us to that 1.5 degrees Celsius warming. So that would be like matching pre-industrial levels, which is really what we need to get back to prevent climate change and effects on birds. Hopefully everybody got to guess this one. I tried to make it a little discreet with just a touch of black on the cat. This is a throwback to my days in Oregon. I feel like that's where I got to really know the Wilson's warbler and just fell in love with him. So I wanted to show you guys, this is again from that 2035 report. This shows kind of where we are currently. So this 2020, 2021 here. We're at about, I'll go on to talk about that, but this is essentially where we're at now. This is where we would need to be in renewable energy, renewable energy by gigawatt by 2035. And just to give you an idea, currently, we're currently running at about 103.6 gigawatts. And the goal is 1,100 gigawatts to get to that kind of that clean energy zone there. And then this just shows, I thought you guys might be interested to see what is our actual potential in the US. How much could we produce if we maxed out all the area that can be, done in wind energy? And so this gives you an idea. We have a lot of room, and we clearly don't need to, invade all those habitats, but that's what we have available. So just coming back, what does this mean? How can we help? What do we do? Clearly, we know that renewable energies are not a zero-sum game. They're going to have an effect on wildlife. But the biggest thing that you can do, or we can do, I think, and I always like to end with kind of a call to action, is to really just do whatever we can to reduce cumulative impacts and take pressures off birds. So, I had that. I'm going to go back here again. We have all these different things that we know are affecting birds. We have, house cats that are out prowling around killing birds. We have, our vehicles. We could be putting up bird safe glass, like any of those components that we can help and advocate for and support, politicians and people that are supporting these causes will be helpful. And so, here's my unhappy bird. I don't know if anybody has guessed what this is yet. Another one of my favorites from Oregon. Just the bird saying, come on, help me. I got a lot of pressure on me. And then here, if we can remove some of those, now our bird's happy. He's got a nice big bug in his mouth and ready to go. And this is a Pacific wren. So that's kind of my take home message, is just whatever you can do, keep your cats and your neighbor's cats inside. Do what you can to make your glass safe on your home and businesses, and hopefully one by one we can just reduce them down, along with stopping climate change, which is a big proponent too. So just wanted to, how am I doing on time, you guys? I have discussion Q&A. Doing good?
Yeah, you've got as much time as you want.
Okay. All right. Well, does anybody have any questions, or, oh, and I guess, does anybody want to guess this last bird? Anybody? We'll see if we can. I don't know if anybody wants to guess them. I'm probably covering it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and give it to you. See if I can get it to come up. There we go. Anna's hummingbird. This is a picture my husband took when we lived in Oregon. So yeah, does anybody have any questions?
So Sandy, you want to read out the questions?
Yes, I will. Um, let's see, some of them you may have seen.
Oh yeah, if actually I can scroll back and just and I can just read them off and then answer them if that works, Sandy.
Right, and then I'll finish up with, there might be a couple that came just to me.
Okay.
One, someone said Iowa has a much higher percentage of solar and wind, which I don't think that went out to everyone.
When compared to other states, is that what? I'm not sure who asked that question. It does have a lot of wind energy. Iowa's been pretty aggressive with their wind energy rollout. So certainly that's definitely true. Did that person have I didn't see that question, but does that person have a question about that?
If anybody wants to address Marci, you can unmute yourself and then go right ahead.
Oh, maybe they'll answer in the.
I do.
Oh, okay, Ray said. I also am seeing a beautiful drawing up here on the screen.
Okay, we'll do that later. There'll be time for pictures later, Milana, but right
After
now
the
we're
speaker.
asking questions.
Okay, so I'm gonna find the first question that I can see, Sandy.
Okay.
So okay, so Mark said Marci might cover this later, but if not, are bird losses to wind turbines location dependent? Do turbines in some locations kill more birds per time or per megawatt? Yeah, so that's definitely true, Mark. That I mean, there's definitely places where you know, definitely areas where the habitat just lends to a higher take. Was that your question?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. And that goes back to that siting, is just anything that we can learn from an existing farm that is having, high numbers of fatalities, then we can hopefully prevent building those turbines in another area. And so that's why that monitoring is so critical, such a critical piece of the process of reducing impacts. But yeah, certainly. And then I see a question from Jerry that says, Marci, for your table on numbers of birds killed by cats, window glass, etc., does that table cover just the United States, or does it pertain to a wider area like North America or maybe worldwide? That is a good question. I believe it was North America. Yeah, I need to double check that. I know it was not worldwide, so it's either North America or the US. And then got some bird guesses. Okay, and then I have a comment from James that said, I've heard birds might mistake solar panels for water and be injured. So yeah, I had heard that as well. Just from kind of through the grapevine, sort of, like not any concrete evidence. And no, reported, nothing that I ever saw that was reported. But, this actually has been studied and was kind of debunked, that birds are affected either by reflection from solar, or that they strike solar panels because they think they're water. I think there were some early on injuries that they wondered if that was the cause, but then they've done some studies since, and it doesn't seem to be that birds are confused by that they seem to be able to differentiate pretty clearly between water and the solar panels. So, as solar rolls out, maybe some species, they'll see that sort of shake out, but so far they kind of debunked that. So that's good, because it's kind of a scary thought.
One question you can't see is, how does nuclear fit into the picture?
Yeah. I think nuclear is really, it would be a really good added benefit to our energy crisis. But there's such a stigma surrounding it. And there's also, it appears that it's extremely hard to create on a smaller scale. So, the footprint of it to create it and kind of the industry of it. And, you've seen the photos of like the big infrastructure that gets built up. So it seems to be that it's just not quite ready for launching like solar and wind is. So solar and wind is just ready to go, and it's ready to launch, and it's ready to meet, hopefully meet these goals of 2035 or 2050 for climate change. And certainly by 2050, I would say we're hopefully going to have other renewable options. But yeah, right now I think solar and wind are just kind of what we have that can be, go to the scale that we need.
Another question you can't see: are damaged or worn out wind turbine blades recycled? Are current working blades going to be painted black?
Oh, those are such great questions. So recycling turbine blades, I actually have just started to learn a little bit about this and don't know more. And I'm going to find out more about this because it is so fascinating to me. I know that was a huge problem, is just kind of how to recycle and get rid of and decommission wind turbines. And so I think there's a lot of energy going in that direction. But yeah, I'm not sure what they were going to do with them at this point. I used to, with my old job, frequently visit wind sites, and I would see the nacelle, what they call like the nacelle, or the kind of the big box that houses all the gears and the kind of the engine of the turbine. I would see those sitting in like side yards, and they're huge. I mean, they're the size, if you haven't been close to one, they're like a camper size or a house size, right? And I always thought that would be the coolest thing, to take those that are worn out or decommissioned and make them into really cool little tiny homes. Like, that would be the coolest thing. So I don't know if they'll come up with some plans like that, just on how to use their parts, but I know there's energy going in that direction. So that's a great question. Any other questions, Sandy?
Did you see the one about, would you tell us more about the changes that might be made to wind turbines to reduce bird/bat kills?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about, we had the painting the blade black, seems to be, and that was a two-part question from before. I do think that is probably going to be something many, many wind farms try, that painting them, because I mean, if you get a 70% reduction, like, why wouldn't you try it? It's pretty cost effective, and you just paint it. So it's pretty easy solution. I think that it would be likable by many people. So yeah, so it'll be cool to see that roll out. I guess we'll all find out, because we'll see turbines with one black blade. And as far as other ways to reduce, like I said, the sound, they've used, certain things for bats with sound, potentially can work. I mean, when it's windy, right? So like, sound doesn't travel very far. So it's kind of a downside of a wind farm, is it happens to be in windy places where sound doesn't travel far. But there's other deterrents they're working on, and some are pretty cutting edge. And yeah. Oh,
And
I think I saw another question.
Do you know what the lifespan of a wind turbine is?
They typically, I want to say that they typically, it's always changing, because they're getting better and better and lasting longer and longer. So I think the current lifespan is somewhere around 20 years. Don't quote me perfectly on that. But, wind farms are usually projected to produce without being rebuilt for, around anywhere between 15 and 20 years. Some of the older ones here in Iowa even, have been here for a while and probably already are being kind of having parts and pieces replaced. So they're able to replace parts for a long time and keep them going. Okay. Oh, and I'm seeing these other ones come through, Sandy.
Okay, yeah.
I've read about that it's impossible to recycle the blades. Yeah, that was a huge issue. Ray, that was Ray that made that comment. It's been a really huge issue. So there's a lot of momentum going in that direction. And then Mark commented and said, why do they think one blade being black reduces deaths? And you know what, Mark? I don't know. I'm guessing it's a visual thing, but I should read up on that, because yeah, why? It's, I'm guessing it doesn't blend in with the background as much. I don't know if you guys have seen, with some turbines, they've painted like the stem or the base of them a different color. And sometimes that's just for human aesthetics, but I think some of it could also create avoidance with hitting that monopole. Well, that's all the questions I see, but if anybody has any other questions, feel free to ask.
Just unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question.
Marci, tell us when you met Ryan. Did you meet him as an undergrad or as a grad student? And what did y'all do for fun when you were courting?
Yeah, I met him actually before I even started my schooling out in Wyoming. I had gotten a job, my third job at that time. I had 3 jobs, and one of them was to make pizzas or sell pizzas and pop at the football game stadium. And so I had gotten a job at Papa John's Pizza, and then Ryan started shortly thereafter, and that's where we met.
You went to both colleges together? You went off to grad school?
We did. Yeah, we were lucky in that way, and even worked in Oregon together on the same project, and then worked for the consulting firm together as well. So we've only separated our paths just recently in November.
And then,
yeah.
so could you court? Was part of your life very, very cold? And what could you do for courtship?
Oh yeah, well, Wyoming is wonderful for cross-country skiing.
Awesome.
I mean, yeah, lots of cross-country skiing, lots of hiking in the mountains, lots of, Wyoming's so beautiful. What is there not to do? There's so much
In
to
the
do out
Arctic?
there.
You were in the Arctic together?
We were, yeah. So the Arctic fox research that was done, that I went and helped on, was Ryan's. So he did his master's on Arctic fox and stress and kind of ecosystem and like their food web dynamics up there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Marci. Unless there's any more questions, we will let you go. You can stay for the rest of our meeting. You don't have to go away.
I better go see my girls. They're probably missing me. But yeah, thanks so much, you guys, for having me. And it's a pleasure talking to you. And it was actually really fun because I've always been passionate about these things, but I actually got to explore them even deeper to talk with you guys. And I'm sure I'll know more and more about it as I go, because it just fascinates me.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing you out at the Conservation Center. So thank you, my dear.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Stop by, say hi. I'm here. Pretty much 8 to 4 Monday through Friday. So.
All right, good.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good night.